Hello. Today we're going to learn about what happens when we have a transversal, and especially when it approaches parallel lines. First, we got to figure out what a transversal is. So if we have two lines and a line cuts through both of them, we call it a transversal. So a transversal cuts through two lines. Now we have some things called interior angles. Those are the angles on the inside. So that's 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now the exterior angles are the angles on the outside. 1, 2, 7, and 8. So those are our first words. There's a surprisingly a lot of words, terms that are associated with this particular situation because it pops up a lot in geometry. Now the first two we've already learned about, vertical angles. Um, we could say 1 and 4 because they're across from each other. We could also say 2 and 3. We could say 5 and 8. And we could say 6 and 7. Any of those would be a good answer for this. Linear pair, there's a whole bunch of them. We could say 1 and 2. We could say 2 and 4, 3 and 4, 1 and 3, 5 and 6, 6 and 8, 7 and 8, and 5 and 7. So many, I'm not going to write them all. But hopefully you get the point about linear pairs. Now corresponding, it's in the same location on the non-transversal lines. So 1 is up in this set of 4. What does it correspond with down here? Well, the 1 corresponds with the 5. So 1 and 5 are called corresponding. Now I'm going to list off all the other ones just so it makes sense to everybody. 2 is in the upper right, and that's going to correspond with 6. Also, 3 is going to correspond with 7, and then 4 and 8. Those all correspond with each other. So I'm going to erase my lines here. Now, alternate interior. Alternate interior. So we know these are our interior. Alternate interiors are when it alternates from one side of the line to another. So 3 and 6. Our only other one is 4 and 5. So either of those would be good answers here. Now, our next one are alternate exterior. So if we take what we have learned in the last couple slides, we have alternate interior, it flips over the line. Exterior now is we're dealing with these ones. So 1, if it flips over the line, it goes to 8. And there's one other one we could do, which is 2 and 7. Now, something else that pops up a lot, consecutive interior, or sometimes they say same side interior. Those are the interior again. I'll go back to the interiors. But now it's the ones that are on the same side. So 3 and 5 would be one, or 4 and 6. So those are a lot of terms. We'll be using these throughout the whole year in geometry. So hopefully we'll eventually get those down. Now, there's a couple other lines, other terms that we need to know. We need to know what parallel lines are. I'm sure you've seen parallel lines before. Now, when you see them in a diagram, they're going to have arrows somewhere on those lines. And when they write it out in words, they'll say AB, 2 lines vertically, and then CD. Sometimes they have a little bit of an angle to these, but most time they're vertical. Perpendicular, 2 perpendicular lines are 2 lines that cross at 90 degrees. We denote that with an angle here. And then we also have it's this weird little upside down capital T. But if you look, those 2 lines are meeting at 90 degrees. So that might help you remember that means perpendicular. And skew lines are lines that don't intersect and are not on the same plane. And they are hard to draw. I can draw one here, but usually it doesn't make sense to most people. It's better to understand that in 3 dimensions. So if you need help with skew lines, we'll talk about it in class, but if you need extra help, please ask me. All right, now here is a situation where we have lines. Now if I took these lines and I tried to make them as parallel as I could. Now those look pretty parallel. Now I'm going to draw on this angle here. I'm going to draw a little cross. Now if I take a look at that cross and moved it down to the other one, notice that these angles are the same as these angles up here. That's not the case if I move it. If I move it, if they're not parallel, and I slide it up, see how those don't line up perfectly? It's only true if they're parallel lines. So that helps us because if I know this angle 70 and this angle 70, subtract from 180 and we get 110 and 110. Now if these lines are parallel, I can transfer all of these down here. So I have 70, 110, 110, and 70. So from knowing this one angle, I can find all 8 of these angles. Now parallel lines with cut by a transversal. Um, now we have corresponding, alternate, interior, and alternate exterior. I apologize for my horrible writing. I'm trying to write quickly and it's really not doing well here. All those angles are congruent when the transversal cuts parallel lines. Now, same side or consecutive interiors are supplementary when it cuts the parallel lines. Note, if the lines are not parallel, the angle pairs still have their original names. I'm spelling it wrong. Original names, they're just not congruent and supplementary. So uh, so if they're not parallel, we can still use these words. We just don't know anything about their values. All right, and that's the end of the lesson.